Welcome to Novelist Spotlight. This is Mike Coyle, your host. In addition to being the host of this podcast and interviewing novelists, I am a novelist myself. I have 3 published novels. My latest is titled Lolita Firestone, a supernatural novel, and it is set in Sedona, Arizona and Cairo, Egypt. My previous novel is titled Family Recipes, a novel about Italian culture, Catholic guilt, and the culinary crime of the century. And my first novel is named Hardwood, a novel about college basketball and other games young men play. And that story deals with issues ranging from depression and racism to sex, religion, and university politics. All 3 novels are listed in the episode notes. I hope you will buy them, I hope you will read them, and I hope you will thoroughly enjoy them. Now, on with our program. In the spotlight is Matt Coyle. He is the author of the best-selling Rick Cahill crime novels. He knew he wanted to be a crime writer when he was 14 years old, and his father bought him a copy of The Simple Art of Murder by Raymond Chandler, and the kid was off and running. As you'll hear here in a minute, because he ended up graduating with a degree in English from the University of California, Santa Barbara, one of the great, most beautiful places on earth. His foray into crime novels or crime fiction was actually delayed for 30 years. Now you see what I mean. The kid was off and running in terms of absorbing this stuff and prepping for the future, but it took 30 years. Over the course of those 30 years, he spent time managing a restaurant, selling golf clubs for various golf companies, as well as being in national sales for a sports licensing company. But he got to the writing process eventually. He wrote nights for more than a decade in producing his 2013 debut novel, Yesterday's Echo. He has since published 8 or 9 other Rick Cahill novels, his latest title being the novel Doomed Legacy. And he has won a bunch of awards that you would recognize, but too numerous to mention, and well regarded among his fellow crime writers as well. Matt Coyle, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. Yes, I was off and running into the great nowhere.
We're going to learn more about that, but I do appreciate you taking the time to come on the program, and especially given the success that you've had with this genre. Let me though go back in time a little bit. Maybe the answer to this question would be obvious now that we've kind of doped out that you spent about 30 years cogitating on being a writer before actually carrying it out. But if you could go back in time and visit with 25-year-old Matt Coyle, what would you tell him?
Well, I think I'd probably tell him to be a little more adventurous and experience life more. I was 25. I was in the restaurant business. I would think I was waiting tables. I had a luxurious degree from UC Santa Barbara. And like most English degrees, if you don't know what you're doing when you get out of school or what you particularly want to do, instead of just dreaming what you think you might do, it's very handy to getting a job in the restaurant business. So that's what I do with my English degree. And the thing is about, I didn't, whatever life I'm not your classic. I mean, there's a huge variety of mystery writers, but I'm not in the mold of an ex-cop, lawyer, doctor, anything like that, or service person. So I make stuff up clearly, but I think what really you need to gain, and of course, the obvious answer to your question was get on your ass or off your ass and start writing. But which I did. I dabbled a bit here and there. Every few months, I think, well, this is when I start. But really, you have to acquire life experience before you can write with any meaning. I think it's absolutely important to write as soon as you can. There's always things to write about, but to really be able, especially in fiction, to really be able to convey true feeling through fiction is you have to live a lived life, experience life. And I really didn't have enough of that for many years. Had I wished I'd started writing much earlier, yes. Say if I started when I was 25, maybe 30 or so, then I would have been a much better writer when I first started writing. But I really didn't have any true life experience to pull out of my heart and put into my fiction. Now, it so
How
happened.
old, well, how old
Go
were
ahead.
you when you actually started writing in earnest?
42 or three.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
So you had a lot of experience under your belt. I was going to say that being a waiter is something that actors do because there's auditions during the day. They make their money at night. I would imagine that did it work this way with writing for you that, or it could have worked this way with writing anyway. You're working evenings, but daytime you would have had time to write. It didn't actually
You're,
work out that way, it
you're
sounds like, but were you thinking
yeah.
those terms at the time?
Well, your question is obviously correct. Could it? Yes, it absolutely could have and it should have. But no, I didn't. And it was on my mind at times. I mean, sure, I would write occasionally, like I said, but no, it was a lot of wasted time. And even if I wasn't writing, I should have experienced life more. But as you get older, things happen in your life and your family's lives, and bring in my family's life, unfortunately, some tragedy. And so from that, you have a lived experience that you can draw from. As I said, unfortunately, sometimes in not the best way. But no, I wish I should have been writing. I mean, the story is true that I did want to be a writer way back when. And the thing about when you were talking about waiters who are actors or waiters, they're able to they need to make some money, but they also have to have some time free. So I had that excuse because I told people, yeah, I'm going to be a writer, blah blah blah, but I never really did it for as many years as we went over. But no, I actually had a perfect job to be a little more, or to be very much more productive as a writer, but I was not.
Well, let me ask you this then. Did the hesitation, I mean, were you consciously thinking, I need to start writing, but your fear of sitting down and writing is what froze you and allowed these years to pass by without actually acting on it? Did you, I mean, was it that sort of a situation? Because that's very common.
Yeah, I think you definitely didn't hit the nail on the head. You definitely at least glanced at it because I think I was afraid of fear. I mean, I was had a fear of failure. And here I did have this legitimate dream. This is what I wanted to do, and I pursued it. I had a degree in English, as we talked about, and I wrote a lot in college and stuff. I wrote poetry, I wrote short stories, but I never went past college much. And I always was. There was a book I was working on, but that was just like I mentioned, a few times a year, every few months. But yeah, there was the fear of failure. Here I am. Here's this dream, this goal. I've even been stupid enough to mention to people that, it is a goal of mine. And then to, if I actually started pursuing it and I found out, well, I really wasn't as good as I thought I'd be, maybe I didn't want to deal with that. I was lazy too, for sure. And drugs and alcohol were involved, although I am now 35 years drug and alcohol free. But
Working in the
yeah.
restaurant business is bad for that, isn't it? You're around alcohol. It's a cash business. People
Yeah.
turn right around and go to a dealer and get their weed or their coke or whatever.
Yep.
And next thing you know, it's wow, I'm doing a lot of this stuff and wasting a lot of money.
Absolutely. But yeah, and it really is that you're at the end of the night, especially in the service industry and the restaurant business, like you said, is you're dealing with people. And so you have to, especially being a waiter, I ended up managing the restaurant in the end, is you're interacting with people. So you kind of have to be up. And even though you're very, especially as a waiter, you're very tired at the end of the night, you are kind of wired. So you want to like continue the wire and talk war stories with the crews across the street. And like you said, it's always there. It's always available. Cash business. I'll meet you in the bathroom for sure. And I actually touched on that a little bit in my first book for sure. Yesterday's Echo, and I probably did a little bit in the others.
What do you see now that you've done the writing? You've been writing for years. You're a success now. You've got the novels out there. You've got the character, this abiding character, Rick Cahill. Um, what do you see as your obligation to your readers?
I see there's a huge obligation. I think well, there again is the fear of failures. I don't want to disappoint them in the quality of writing, and I don't want to write the same thing over and over, which is hard not to do when you're writing a series. character. I mean, storylines can change, but the plot points. I mean, the main through lines, but you're dealing with a single character, and he generally or she generally is trying to overcome something in their life, and so that's always and for Rick, as a matter of fact, that's a major. There's always a major subplot in Rick's personal life. So I don't want to tell the same story over and over. So I try to, but there are things he's working out, and so I try to have little different angles on that with each book I write. But yeah, I feel very responsible to my continuing readers, and sure, I want to get as many new readers as I possibly can, but I am always thinking about my continuing readers, those people who have been with me from book one or started reading book five and now read all 10 books. Yeah, those are the people that word of mouth me and word of mouth a lot of authors on social media, tell their friends, write reviews, come to your book signings, write you to get your newsletters and respond to them. And they're involved. They care. I'm going to go on a little bit because I think you touched a great point. I go to writers' conferences. It's one of the favorite things I do. It is my social life, but except for the quiet evenings my girlfriend have and the occasional travel and conference and concerts we go to. But I knew this, but I didn't really hit home. I was going to BoucherCon, which is the biggest mystery conference in the world. It's every year. It's a different city. Dallas, it was the last one before COVID hit. So it's 19 or something. And I was flying from San Diego, and there was a couple that comes to all my book signings in San Diego, and they go to everybody's mystery book signing. So I see them, they're friends. And we're on the plane, we're talking together. And I thought, man, these people, every free vacation they have, they line it up to a writers conference. They go see events, but they're really supporting authors all over the country. They go, they support, they get the book signed. It's just an amazing thing to have that kind of readership that we all have, and the people that really care and immerse themselves in the genre. It's a fantastic thing, and I knew it, but just being on the same flight and everything, I thought, man, these people do this every. I knew because I knew they did every time, but it really hit me home. Like, wow, this is such a big part of their lives, and we're so lucky to have them. They're so dedicated, and they can replay your book to you much better than I possibly could. They can tell me something about book three that I have forgotten years ago. Like, oh yeah, you're right. I did like that.
So how do you, to begin with, what is the best conference for a detective writer or mystery writer? Is there one that stands head and shoulders?
Well, I do write hardboiled fiction, which is kind of a forgotten subgenre in some ways, but not so much. I mean, there's huge. There's Robert Crace is a huge detective writer, and Reed Fell Coleman, who doesn't write him so much anymore, but still, it is BoucherCon. I mean, the whole huge major genre of mystery, which I like to call crime. That's the biggest one, BoucherCon. That's definitely the best one to go to. But I go to some of the small ones too. There's Left Coast Crime, just the same idea with the it's mostly writers from the West Coast or Southwest.
What's your agenda when you're there? What is your you go there with a certain agenda or a certain you're going to do certain things that work for you. What works for you at these conferences?
My agenda is to touch as many readers as possible. So there's in some ways the conference makes that as easy as possible for you to do. They have the speed dating thing where you and a pal writer get together usually like at 8 o'clock on a Saturday or like a Thursday morning, the first morning of the conference, and there'll be probably how many people are in there? Probably 160 fans are sitting at tables waiting for you to come, the two of you to come to the table. There's 40 writers, I guess. Talk a minute and a half about your new books, and then go on to the next table, and they're taking notes. It's an amazing thing. So you're able to get readers to at least look you up that way. I take readers to lunch or breakfast. There's panels, of course. What else had I done? I've
Speaking roles, right? Probably right.
Pardon me?
speaking roles,
Well, yeah,
perhaps?
the panels, yeah. But I did something unique this last year, but maybe I didn't. But yeah, that my agenda is to get talk to as many readers as possible, and then play poker at night and hopefully win some lunch money. But
Uh,
it is a social event, but it is to me, it's a working trip, and it's a great marketing opportunity. You're spending a lot of money. It's not like it's out of my pocket. My publisher doesn't pay for any of this, but it's if you're a guest of honor or something, that's different. But it's an excellent opportunity to market yourself to your fan base, to the people that read the stuff you write, that you don't get very often.
mhm, mhm. So, what is your state of mind when you sit down to write each day?
Hmm.
I mean, some people are very timid at the keyboard. Some people maybe are aggressive. Some people are, who knows what? Maybe they're using a mind-altering substance to try to start things up. Do you bring a certain state of mind that's consistent that you consciously bring to the keyboard because it works for you?
That's a good question. I've never been asked that. I haven't really thought about it, but I think I probably do.
Let me tell you why
Um,
I'm asking that question. I'd read Stephen King's book on his quasi memoir
yeah,
on writing, it's called, and
right.
he said you got to come to the desk with an attitude. You got to bring an attitude there, kind of, and he made it sound a little bit like, I'm going to be tough and I'm going to be aggressive. I'm going to attack this thing. But that's him. That's not necessarily everybody. That's why I even asked the question, because there was obviously a very successful writer who really thinks in terms of I'm not just going to sit down. I'm going to sit down with game face on.
Well, yeah, it's not. I don't think I go in with that attitude. Maybe I should. I mean, Stephen King, I've heard of him. I am an aggressive typist. I'll say that. I will further answer your question, but I'm an aggressive typist that I type very hard. I like a clacking keyboard. Um, but I generally every day I revise what I wrote the day before, so I'm able to work my way back into the story that way. But I generally I am a very we'll call it organic writer. I don't really outline, but I generally kind of have a word count in mind. I have ideas that I think I need to work through in that particular writing session. But especially when I'm writing a first draft, I think can go wherever it wants to, and I'm happy with that. That's fine.
What's your target
Um,
word count wise?
oh, it changes in the beginning. It's not even 1,000 words in the beginning, but in the end, it's maybe 2,500 words a day, and it can be whatever it needs to be. It generally gets bigger as I go, bigger than
As
I
you get
wanted it
deeper
to
into the
be.
book? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you toggle back and forth then. There's a production day where you're laying copy, and then the next day you're doing your rewriting.
Well, all the days are pretty much the same. As I start every day revising what I wrote the day before, and that just gets me into the flow. And then
I
I'm
see.
working on whatever's new. And
Gotcha.
that word count. But I'm trying to. When I was writing Rick books, I wrote 10, and there's a pause right now. I'm writing something different right now.
I was going to
Um,
ask you that actually. What do you want to write other than Rick Cahill? Because I look at a guy like John D. McDonald, the late John D. McDonald wrote,
yeah,
endless Travis McGee novels, but then he wrote something like, A Key to the Sweet, which was outstanding. One of my favorite novels, and but it had nothing to do with Travis McGee. And you see this with John Grisham as well, where
yeah.
it's they step out and decide, this is something I'd really like to write. I don't want to be completely captive to my genre or my character. In your case, you've got a recurring character. So what are you working on that you can talk about?
Yeah. I would say Grisham is really probably the best at doing something different, doing it well. I'm not writing something completely different. I'm writing the genre because it's the genre I love. It's the genre I think in when I write, and it's the genre I read whenever I can. And I do read nonfiction, but I read mystery, and I read mystery while I'm writing. I'm fine with it; it doesn't bother me. But there's there's been there are career thoughts, decisions on making at this point after 10 books, what I'm doing now, and just part of the biz. I don't really want to get into that part of it, but I knew it was time to write something different. And by the way, the last Rick book, as of now, the last Rick book is called Odyssey's End. Actually, Doom Legacy was the one before,
Oh,
which was
that's
nine.
the most
Odyssey's End
recent.
is 10. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Um, I'm writing. Well, here's the other thing: is I'm writing in third person, and Rick's all in first person. Took me 10 years to get published, 10 books. So that's basically 20 years I was writing first person in the head of a single character, and someone who I was a part of the family to me. And now I'm writing in third person, and I have multiple points of view, although right now it's a first draft and there's a lot in one particular character's point of view, male and female points of view. So
Was
that's a
that a
challenge in
difficult?
itself. Pardon me?
Yeah, was that a difficult transition to go from first person, which you've been doing for years, now third person?
Yes.
What
Yes.
what what do you feel? What is third person doing for you, just in terms of? I'm sure there's aspects to third person that you feel like, wow, this is really freeing me up.
Yes. Well, if I'm not there
Despite
yet.
being difficult, despite
Well,
oh, okay, you're
it
still
should.
working on, to hit that
Well,
particular
but it's a
emotion.
good point. It's a good point. If you're going to write in third person, you have to take advantage of the opportunities you don't have in first person. So I haven't really gotten to that point yet, but it's a rough, rollicking first draft, so I'm not worried about it. But the difficulty for me is that when I started the reason I chose to do it is because I did not want to write Rick Cahill again, although there are some similarities. So I thought I need to get a little more distance from the character. um, I love first person. I think it's a cheat, and I'm fine with that because I could just get right into Rick's head. So I don't have that, and I didn't want to have that. So I need to find other ways. But then I realized I was writing too distant for I because I've read third person my whole life. I wrote it. I haven't written it in so long that it's been an exploration, and so I realized, no, you're just too far away. You got to, because I wasn't even learning enough about the characters I was writing because I was too far away. So I've gotten much closer, and the other point of view character, and when I'm in her head, I've gotten much closer there too. And it's going to be a process, and I'm realizing that, I'll work through it. But it's, it's funny, and I'm glad you brought up the different opportunities because I kind of forget about that there are, man, you can have somebody else do something that your main guy doesn't even know about.
Yeah, yeah,
But the reader does. And I go, well, this is new. And here's the funny thing. I was telling, because as you and I talked or emailed beforehand, I just had rotator cuff surgery. So I hadn't typed for a while. And I started to write a couple of days ago again. And I realized I looked at the first sentence and it was I. I was in first person. I don't know. This is a
right.
mistake.
You kind of default to that.
I did completely.
So the book you're working on, is it general fiction, or is it still part of the genre but a different take on it?
It's the genre. Yeah, there are some similarities to Rick, I must say. Former cop who left the force under not good circumstances. Only his former best friend, lieutenant, knows what he did, and he said, "This can't stand. You can't be a cop anymore, or we're going to have to take this thing to judicially, where it should go." And there's reasons, of course, why my guy's done what he did, and he's a true believer in the thin blue line. On one side of the thin blue line, his dad was a cop. His dad's ill now, and he needs basically 24-hour care. So his son's trying to help pay for that. He's not making it as a PI, not making enough money. So there's an opportunity to work for the public defender's office, get some steady income, and he can't turn it down. But he's a true believer, and he's going to work for the enemy. His dad's not happy about it. And the woman he ends up partnering with, the public defender, is a true believer on the other side. And so there's that dichotomy, and they end up having a romantic relationship. And she will ultimately learn more about him that will maybe change things for her. But there's it's fun because my girlfriend actually is a public defender, so to hear all the stories, what goes on in the courtroom is fascinating stuff. And my family and my late brother-in-law was a cop for 33 years. My nephew, his son's been a cop for 18 now. Both daughters married cops. Definitely law enforcement in my blood, but I'm also, I also distrust huge power structures. And with my girlfriend Juliet, I get stories every day about what the DA chooses to prosecute and not. So it's very interesting to see different points of view, and I bring that up a little bit in the book. So there's that fun of it, but there is an actual crime in here, and there's a murder suspect who's been arrested, and it just seems like a sexual murder that grows into something much larger, which is always the things I like. I mean, I'm not going to say that there's anything small about murder, but to me, the funnest stories to write, and that was true in the Rick days too, is Rick have a little case, something small, trying to, something made no sense, run a background check on some guy, and then just have it kind of piece by piece grow into something much larger. And that's always fun.
No plot thickening.
Yes.
So given that this is still Crime and Punishment, you'll be writing under the Matt Coyle name, is that right?
Oh yeah.
Okay. And are more Rick Cahill novels coming?
Um,
Or are you done with Rick Cahill?
I just say I would never be done with Rick's world. I wrote in that world for 20 years inside his head, if he's still around or not. And I can't imagine not writing that world again. But I am taking a break. There's some business thoughts about it, but and it would be if I was well, anyway, I would. It was time to have a palate cleanse anyway after 10 books to write something a little different, and so I
Right.
got as
It'll probably
different
make
as I
your next Rick Cahill novel that much stronger,
hope
just
so.
because you've broadened the range there and gotten some fresh content, fresh thinking. Describe. I know I asked you about you write, you have a word target that changes day to day, but describe a good day of writing. Obviously, it's not just about word count. It's not just about um, well, I'll ask you, what is a good day of writing? How would you describe a good day of writing? Or maybe when you have one of those really special days of writing, what is it like?
Well, there's a couple different things that can be a couple different things, and we're as well, especially as it gets closer to deadline. Although what I write, my agent has to sell to a new publisher, so it'll be that challenge. But so I'm not under a deadline, and I wish I was. Um, but there's so word counts kind of it's always good to have that. But writing is a solitary business in many ways, but there's it's not as solitary as people may think. But it is basically just you in a room most of the time. And so and there's also for me at least, being of Irish descent and being always questioning your worth, whether you still have it, whether you can still do this. And some days where you realize, man, that was a solid day's work, and I can do this. And in fact, I'm actually doing it better than I was before. But for me, best the the best days are when, as I said, I don't outline. So, and the story's constantly working in my subconscious, and things are ruminating and coming together. But when something drops out of the ether, and then you've worked it, and it gets you to the next level that you're trying to tell, and you didn't really know is where you needed to go, but your subconscious is pushing that way. When that drops and when you find that something, that's a great day. When you find the next level of your plot, of your character, which is even better. When you find the next deeper level, that is a great day. That is a day where I will text my girlfriend probably right after it happens and say and tell her how excited I am.
Now, I heard you say that your advice to writers is look, write every day. There's days when the last thing I want to do is sit down and write,
Yeah,
but you fight through it. And when you fight through
yeah,
it and you continue to do that, what ends up happening is you'll find a wellspring that you didn't know that you had.
absolutely.
And that stuck with me. I want to ask you, talk about the wellspring. What is that experience like? What, how would you describe the wellspring and maybe the just kind of the overall experience of it?
Well, it's a job, but every job has its good days and its bad days, and the things you don't like doing, and the things you do like. I mean, if you have a job where you hate everything, then you should probably find a new job. So it's a job, and when you sometimes it's easy to at times it's like, well, I just don't feel it today. I'm not inspired. Blah blah blah. And yeah, that's you're never inspired. How often are you inspired? It's not enough. So when you push through that, when you stare at the key, stare at the monitor for a half hour, sometimes not even typing a word, letting your mind drift. Although I actually don't do this as much as I used to. I'm much more productive in my non-productive days. But when you push through that, something does break open. And for me, those are sometimes my best writing days when I didn't think I was going to hit my word count. I just thought it was going to be lackluster. But I just, no, you just got to keep going. But I don't remember mentioning the wellspring, but
Do
I'm
you have
sure
those
it's in,
days though where the words just, hey, they're flowing. They're just coming.
yeah, but it doesn't come very like as you mentioned it's not for me right away. And it doesn't, you have to hit the wall. For me, I have to hit the wall and then the brakes and then it flows. Yeah. And then it starts flowing. And I think that a lot of young writers, not young me in terms of writing years, not hell, I was very old when I started. But when you're young in the process or early in the process, you just kind of there's so much doubt there because it's a hard thing to do, trying to put or what always has been for me, putting ideas down on a paper that makes sense.
Yeah,
Um,
for everybody,
and
really.
you have to, there's that doubt, and you got to push through the doubt, and then you realize, oh, let it go. And just on sort of on that, along those lines, the great John LaSquaw, great mystery writer, I heard him say once at a conference, he goes, when I'm writing a first draft, I allow myself to write shit. And that
Hmm.
really makes sense to me because sometimes you just gotta, hey, I'm plugging away here. This isn't very good, but that's okay because here's I'm finding my story this way. So you have to allow yourself to write shit.
Yeah, for sure.
You can't have it at the end, but when you're laying tracks, it's okay because there are some nuggets in there.
Yeah, and it was Anne Lamott who wrote the book Bird by Bird, and she just says, all those writers you admire, all the writers that you think have stellar talent, they write shitty first drafts, and you're going to write a shitty first draft. Just write
Yes,
the shitty first draft and get on with it.
exactly. Exactly. And
And
that's so hard when you're young.
yeah, yeah, because I think when you read a finished product, if you read John Updike, let's say, it looks so effortless because his finished product looks so effortless. Like he didn't have any trouble at all. This thing just poured out of him. But it's never really that way. It's just it's a process. It's definitely a process. Now, is your regimen? I mean, let's talk time per day. Are you a 2 hour day guy? I mean, writing's very exacting. You can exhaust yourself with writing. Are you 2 or 4 hours a day, 6 hours a day? And I'm sure it varies, but if you were to kind of peanut butter it or average it out, what's your writing regimen like in terms of time and place?
I say the writing is 4 to 6. In the beginning, close to 4, and in the end, more than 6. But there's the more you write, there's always ancillary things to do. There's a lot of requests made, which is fine because you made requests too when you were along the way, and you still do. And so it's everybody tries to help each other out in the mystery biz. And so there are other things, other readings and things that take your time that is also part of your workday generally. So there can be even other things you're writing that don't have to do with your story. But I do try to do at least 4 to 6. I think four is an important number. Um, and but it's for me. I was reading The End of Stress. I can't remember the author's name, the writer's name. It's a great book about dealing with stress. And there's some study, he brings up a lot of studies where something like the maximum amount of attention you can really be successful at is 90 minutes. And so you should take breaks after that. And I basically will go about 2 hours and I'll take a break. And so I used to be pretty, sit in the seat for blah, blah, blah for this amount of hours. So I will just, try to hit the next level and then I'll take a break and go for a walk or something. When I used to have my buddy, my dog, I would take him for walks all the time. So my doesn't hurt the production at all. It's probably helped it, and it's really easy. The beginning every day, every morning for me is kind of the hardest part. But getting deeper into the story. But after I've got the flow going, after and taking an hour and a half break or something, or 2 hours, when I sit back down, it's not too hard to get back into it.
Do you write in the same place every day? Is there a writing room,
I
or
do.
are you do? Okay.
Yeah, I
Now,
got an office.
is that
Yeah, it's not exciting in any way, but it works for me. When I look out the window, I see a fence between me and my neighbor, who's a great family. Occasionally, I will see a bird on the roof, that's an exciting day for me. And above my desk, there's kind of an old coastal view of like Highway 101 version. It's a print. It's artistic print of maybe like 1940s or something vehicles, and it just kind of gives me that kind of hard boiled feel to look up to. I don't really look at it that much, but it's nice to know it's there. But no,
right?
there's nothing very exciting about my working space. But I do like to be in my office writing. I know people who go to coffee shops and very successful doing it. I don't like the clatter around me. I can
So you
do it
don't
if I
listen to
have
music.
to.
You don't listen to music while
I
you're
do.
writing.
Here's the thing.
Oh, you do.
Every well, I don't very often. I do it out of necessity sometimes. If there's too much noise, specifically, well, I will give you a very specific. For instance, there was a guy that used to live behind me, an attached wall, who didn't. His wife worked. I don't know what he did, but he used to whistle. He was a whistler, and it wasn't like he was whistling show tunes or something. He'd just be whistling this insanity. And I remember I posted on Facebook one time, not very smart to be a whistler next door to a guy who thinks about how to kill people and get away with it every night. Um, so I actually have a particular Grover Washington CD. It was a CD album that I listened to. I think it's called Time Out of Mind. And it's jazz fusion.
Hmm.
But there are a couple of a couple songs with vocals. But I can write with that thing going pretty much anytime because I honestly think in every book I've written with that in my background a little bit. But generally, I just do like I can't. It doesn't have to be total quiet, but I don't like to write with music. But if I have to, that CD or that album always works for me.
Interesting. So, no particular ritual that you observe. I mean, you write in the same place every day. You've got your word count, your time that you're going to put in. But there's no particular ritual to get started with. Is that right? You don't do a
Uh,
headstand or meditate for 15 minutes ahead of time or anything of that sort.
Mainline heroin. That's it. That seems to work for me. No, not really. Well now I do start probably later than I used to because every morning I get up and walk a couple miles. I drive to a place in La Jolla, and then I walk about 2.5 miles. So that kind of it starts my day. I try to get up as early as I can. that starts my day a little bit later, but I do feel kind of in better energy than probably I used to be when I just wake up and wander into my office and start writing. So
Now, do
it
you
is
start writing in your head while you're walking? Do you end up finding that you start to write in your own head, or do you resist that temptation and just wait till you're back to the keyboard?
it depends. Sometimes something will break, uh, but strangely, and maybe I'd be more productive if I did write in my head on my walks. But my most creative productiveness is when I'm sitting with my hands on a keyboard, which to me is so strange because 20 years ago I could barely type, and the idea of thinking through my fingers onto a keyboard was crazy. But but my subconscious is always working on the story. My mentor to me, Carolyn Wheat, told me once, she said, your subconscious is a much better writer than you are. I could not disagree with her. She's absolutely right. But
So
no,
how
I
do you
am
access it?
the subconscious.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, it's simply a matter of you keep writing, or is there any other methods that she recommends or that you've learned to access it more readily?
it's just being open. It's most important to me in a first draft, and that's just being open to anything. And so that means when I'm rolling along and some out of nowhere thought comes to me and it doesn't kind of make sense. It may have been, as say in a Rick book, it may be an internal thought by Rick, it may be dialogue from someone else, it may be someone else walks by the scene. And I write it. I put it in. I call it dropping anchors. I drop the anchor. I don't necessarily, it may not mean anything. I don't know where it's going to go, but I let it sit there and I move forward. Sometimes the what it really means comes to me in that writing session. Sometimes maybe the next day when I'm revising. Sometimes maybe I got to pull up anchors at the end of the first revision. Um, but being open to any possibility instead of having well, this is what I need to get done today. I need to have these sets of fun. I'm open. Pour it into me. Pour it into me. It'll come out. I'll sift it through on revision and we'll figure out what it means. And I would say at least 75% of the time, those anchors give me a much better idea of what I'm trying to do, what I've always thought I was trying to do. And this is the avenue that it's giving me an avenue to reach what I've tried to do. And generally it can be a plot thing, but often it's insight into a character.
So describe your voice, which is, because you write first person, is Rick Cahill's voice. If you were to throw some adjectives out there that describe the voice of Rick Cahill, of Matt Coyle, what would those adjectives be?
Well, that's a difficult one because we all.
Matt, you still there?
Yeah, can you hear
Oh,
me?
okay. You cut out for you. You said that's a difficult one, and then you cut out for just a little bit. If you could
Well,
pick it up from there.
I was giving up on the. I think my connection's not great. I was giving up on the question. Um, I would say there's a definite terseness to Rick. Um, there's grit. There's grit. There's terseness, but there's also. I find the right word for this. There's
Would you say cynicism or skepticism?
there's definitely cynicism, skepticism, but there's also, I don't want to say insecurity, but there's he's particularly his books go along. He's willing to question his own motives. So there's maybe uncertainty with, am
Mm-hmm.
I doing the right thing? Because he lives by his own code. He breaks the law at times. He commits violence at times against very bad people, but he begins to wonder, is this, am I becoming one of them? Um, but there's definitely a terseness. There's definitely skepticism. There's kind of an old world skepticism, but there's a slight openness to him as well.
Now, I know that you either belong to or did belong to a writers group. Talk about being a part of a writers group and what the value of it is.
Yeah, I was in various writer groups for up until my last couple, two or three books, and I truly believe in them. I think it's an invaluable asset to have when you're first starting out, or probably when any level of writing career you're on, because especially mystery, we're writing stories, and as I the subconscious, all that, the story is always in your head, whether you know it or not, but you're always working through things in it. So you're writing this thing, and particularly you're writing first person. So well, I know it's going to happen. So you don't really understand yet if if you're giving enough information about what's going and maybe going inside your character's head or with the plot points. Are you giving the reader enough for them to understand and go along with you, or are you overloading them? This You're beating them over the head with this, and because it's in your head all the time. It's this personal thing in your head all the time. It's so helpful to have an outside reader, outside point of view, especially if they know the genre and they can write. Look, and they go, well, no, wait a second, this isn't making sense here, or this does make sense. It doesn't always have to be in your genre. It's helpful to have at least a writer in the group in your genre. It doesn't have to be though, but it's so important. But on top of that, maybe almost as important as that in that is you learn to critique better, and in critiquing you become a better writer. It's
Mm.
not your work that you're critiquing for a change. You're not going over it every day, and it's not yours. It's someone else's, and you're seeing maybe similar mistakes that you make, or something that you hadn't thought that's really well done. So I think they're huge benefits. I've just kind of gotten to the point where I don't do them anymore. I've been, writing for 20 years. It doesn't mean I know what I'm doing, but life has kind of worked out where I'm not in writers groups anymore. I do have my agent's a really good reader, and I have other people. My girlfriend's a great reader. Um, but I really think I talk about them all the time when I give them the opportunity. I think it's a great thing to have. And it doesn't have to be a writers group. It could be a beta reader, someone who understands the genre, and someone who doesn't love you, or they don't love you that much. They have
Willing
to
to be
be
critical.
exactly. And it takes a while. Um, I was really fortunate in all the groups I was in. It took a while to sort it out. We didn't know what we were doing when we first started. After there's probably about 8 or 9 of us. After we were all in this writing class taught by the great Carolyn Wheat, and we formed this group. And it took us some shaking out to figure out how to do it and get the egos out of it. But I've been so fortunate in all those years of people really, after we got everything settled down, and every group was everybody there was trying to make everybody else's story as good as it could possibly be. And when you get to that point, you're in a great group, and everybody's work is going to get better. And I've been so lucky to have groups like that.
Now, it's interesting that you write organically rather than outlining. Um, but what is your starting point? Do you simply have a concept? Do you know where it's going to start and end, and then you just start writing? How does it work?
Yeah, for the Rick books, of course, their first book was all over the place for many years until I finally figure out where it's going. But so I've got this continuing character, and he's got a very complicated backstory, and so there's always something going on in his private life that is the main subplot. So I have that. Really the first thing I have. I do have to, what's the story going to be about? I have to have a target that I'm aiming for. There has to be an inciting incident. There has to be in the PI series. There has to be a reason for Rick to take the case. Then sometimes I don't really, I don't force to find them, but sometimes subplots come right away. There's a subplot here and there, but and those can change, of course. But so really, when I'm writing the Rick book, is I'm trying to find, because the subplot is there for me. It's a continuing story. He's a real person who's lived a hard life, but there is something, and particularly in the last three books, he's battling a disease, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, the pro football brain disease.
Mm.
And so that is, I mean, then you can't walk away from that subplot. It's there. It's something he has to deal with. And so I've tried to deal with the different aspects of it in the last 3 books. But so I've got the built in, and I have to and then he has a family now, and that's in the latest book, Odyssey's End. They're separated as it begins, and his only goal in life is how can he get it back together. And so, but what case will he take that'll make that more difficult? He may not know at the time. But so I'm always trying to, what can make his personal life more difficult, and even his personal life make his professional life more difficult. And in the case he takes, there's always, danger and violence involved. So, and then I just kind of, I heard the great, why do I always blank on Perry's first name? Anyway, I apologize, Perry.
Oh, not at all.
Anyway, he once said, you know, how am I going to know the story I'm writing in regarding outlining? Well, how am I going to know what's going to happen a year from now, right now, as opposed to writing the story? And so that I agree with. I do think it's important to have a target. So it doesn't have to be terribly specific, but it is a journey, and you're not just on a journey walking through the outback. You're on a journey rather, trying to get somewhere. So having that target at the end helps you find like little signposts along the way. So it's definitely, for me, I definitely have to know the ending, or a really good idea for the ending, which can change, and they change a little bit. But and then go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that, given that you're writing organically.
Thomas Perry.
Thomas Perry. Gotcha.
Yeah, great writer.
So, well, given that you're writing organically, and what you're basically saying is this thing will take shape as we go. Have you started books where this is just, I thought it was going to work, it's not happening, I'm throwing it away, and I'm going to go to work on a different concept? Or have you always been able to work it out?
Yeah, I think I've always been able to work it out. I had in the first book on it, Yesterday's Echo, nobody cared whether I got a book done or not. So nobody knew who I was. So yeah, there was probably a lot of dead ends on there, but I just kept writing the same book over and over, and revising. So maybe there's some dead ends there that I can't remember that, and I tweaked the books in certain ways, but no, I haven't had one where I've had some where I thought, oh boy, I am pretty deep into this, and it is, I don't think it's a great concept, but I've always managed to find that thing, like I said, that anchor that drops, that gives me the avenue to go where I want to go. So, and sometimes they've all turned out to be, I'm proud of them all. I don't think I'm the greatest writer in the world, but I'm proud of everything I've written. But yeah, to me, there's always doubt. But thankfully, because I heard Michael Connelly say one time he did put 400 pages away in a drawer one time. Oh my God.
Did he ever get back to it?
I think I asked him about that, and I don't think he did. I don't think he turned to anything else.
Well, it worked for him because he's obviously been very productive.
Yeah, he's written a few books over the years. Yeah. Great writer, great guy.
So there's literally millions of people out there who want what you have, who want to get to the place that you're at right now. So what would you tell all these aspiring crime writers in terms of the advice for maximizing their efforts in hopefully getting to that promised land?
Crime writer specifically, yeah. I would say do your homework. First of all, I had a degree in English, blah, 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 all that time. But I did take writing classes at night. That's why I met Carolyn Wheat. And so I would say learn the basics. Sometimes we forget about the basics, but you need to learn story. Learn story. You can tweak it as you need to go, but have that in your back pocket so you know what's right. But it is, of course, right. But it's also do your research and go to these mystery conferences and meet the other writers and meet law enforcement people and lawyers. And here's the interesting thing that I have found over 20 years of writing crime is that I only had one time where I tried to contact somebody and they just blew me off. And ironically, it was a rancher in Idaho, which was kind of a bummer because my grandfather was a rancher. Um, but everybody you can call, I've called governmental agencies, I've called law enforcement, well, this is a governmental agency, bankers, Navy SEALs. It goes on and on, all sorts of different things about cryptocurrency. My last book. I don't know if she's an expert, but she gave me some great information. And everybody has been willing to give you their time, and you have to be precious of their time. If they give you their time, be ready with what you need to know. But definitely reach out to people because you'll be so surprised how willing. And the little when you do that, there'll maybe something you're not looking for, but it's that one little piece of truth that you could find no other way that if you have in your story, you'll go, wow, that's this person must know what they're talking about. But I would say, yeah, do your research and do due diligence, meet as many people as you can. But of course, you have to write. But I would say go to conferences too, meet people.
Go to conferences, join a writing group.
Yes, absolutely.
You're an
Mystery
advocate
Writers
of
of
that.
America, Sisters in Crime. Yeah.
How has your I want to ask you, I tend to ask people how they expect their writing to change with age. Now, you've been writing for a while, so we could take this a couple different ways. How has your writing changed with experience? And secondarily, how do you expect your writing to change as you get older?
Um, this is kind of a, I wish I was a little more esoteric. Uh, this is just kind of, yeah, makes sense. My first drafts have gotten better. They're still terrible, but they've gotten better. And so I've become much more economical in even as I write these long first drafts, much more economical in the writing I am putting on the paper, even though it can be long. I'm able to condense in my thoughts quicker, better, more efficiently than I was in the beginning. So I would say my first drafts are better. My decisions making is better. Realizing the dead ends to cut sooner than in the past, maybe. In terms of in the future, uh, I would hope to just be more efficient. I've always would hope to be more efficient, and I just said in some ways I am, but I still have the same kind of really crazy process. I have tried to change it, and it just stunted me. And so I realized your brain works the way your particular brain, this brain works the way it does. And when I try to put too many boxes around it, it doesn't work for me. But and yet, as I go through this process every time, I think this is really not the way you should write a book. That's why I don't really do any teaching because I can critique. I feel I'm a really good critiquer, but in terms of explaining how to write a book, how I would write a book, it doesn't make any sense. But yet, so I always question as I'm going through, why can't you do it in a much more efficient way? But I've tried it and it doesn't work for me.
Mm. One more question, Matt, and that has to do with you're talking about writing a first draft. When you write your books, are you writing from beginning to end a first draft and then going back, or are you going chapter by chapter, or even section of a chapter by section of a chapter? What's your method as far as that goes?
It is pretty much A to Z, chronological, day one, day two. However, because I am open to anything, there are times where I can get stuck and I batted my head against the wall for a day or two in a row and I'm just not breaking through yet. And so even though I don't outline, especially the further along you get in the story, the more you need that needs to be done. In fact, I don't outline, but as I'm writing through a story, maybe about halfway or 2/3 of the way through the first draft, or maybe just the end of the first draft, more like 2/3 of the way to the end of the first draft, I will make notes on this is what's needed. You need this and this. So I'll have that note, those lists. So I will go forward in the story in time and write a scene that I know is important that I have to write, as opposed to going chronologically because I'm stuck back at this other place. And sometimes that kind of eventually the other place will become more. Figure my way through. So then I'll go back. I'll always go back, but I do like to write day 1 through day 30, generally about 10, 12. But I'll do it any other way. But if I were to, for me, it definitely works like, well, this is what I'm on day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5.
So there's actually one other question I wanted to ask you, and that has to do with the book you're working on now, the non-Rick Cahill book.
Yeah.
When is that? Do you have a completion date? Do you have a publication date? Can you kind of estimate when that will be coming to market?
My hope is by the end of 2025. I have to write it. My agent has to sell it, and a new publisher has to publish it. So, and the publisher I've been with, been great to me. I like them; they're good people. So I'd always been on a 2-book contract, so I always had the next book in front of me. And with Odyssey's End, I just thought, I'm taking a pause from Rick, so and need to kind of move forward a little bit. So I don't have a publisher right now. So we have to write a really good book, and she has to sell it to a really good publisher who wants to give me some money and see where it goes.
A lot of steps involved.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I realized that things are going to be different, and that I needed to do this for my career, and I needed to take a palate cleanse from Rick, no matter where I was. But yeah, it's kind of right now I feel a little bit in the wilderness, and I started to think about it, the ups and downs in writing, and this is part of the journey. So it's been a kind of when I finally got published, it's been kind of a smooth path for me. So I think this is part of the bumps along the way that I'm going to have to maneuver over.
Well, I wish you luck with the book, Matt, and thank you so much for coming on the program.
Hey, thanks for having me. A really good interview. Really enjoyed it.